Okay, that's the meeting recording. So I will take the adherent of the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee on the 22nd of June 2022. I have apologies from Councillor Buchanan, but Councillor Keat is present as a substitute member, and I can see that you have joined the meeting. Also present, we have Councillor Dempsey, Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Fulton, and Councillor Gowland. Councillor Handybod? No. Councillor Kerr, I can see that you are present. Councillor Lockhart? No. Councillor McDougall is present. Also in attendance today, we have Councillor Fagan and the Chief Executive, Cleland Snedden. We also have a number of officers present. And with that, I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Elizabeth Ann. And first item on the agenda is declaration of interests. To ask the members of the committee if there are any declarations to be made.
I don't see any hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to item 2, which is the Internal Audit Annual Assurance Report 2021-2022. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback.
Thank you, Chair. You'll remember the training session that we've just had. I mentioned this was one of the key documents that would come to the Audit Committee. So this is an end-of-year report that comes to you. Section 1.1 sets out the purpose of the report, so it's threefold. It's to express an audit opinion on the governance, risk management and control arrangements within the Council for the year ended 31st of March 2022. The start of the report in the background sets out the internal audit's function and compliance with internal audit standards. That's obviously important that we comply with those standards because it then allows you to place reliance on the balance of the report. In terms of how we assess our compliance, that's a self-assessment exercise, and that's something that you can do for a period of 5 years. Thereafter, you have to have an external or independent assessment of that compliance. And at 3.2, we're noting the fact that 22-23 is the end of that 5-year period. So this is a report that the Audit Committee will see in due course as an external assessment of the level of compliance with those standards. The report then goes on at 3.4 and 3.5 to just set a wee bit of background to 21-22, reflecting on the fact that it really wasn't the post-pandemic period that we anticipated, and it continued to have an impact on the internal audit function. There's plenty of professional guidance out there that allows us to still express an audit opinion, and the report within those paragraphs is setting out the guidance, and this was guidance that we took account of and we applied in the year. Section 4 of the report takes you through the link to the Council's top risks, again referring back to the training. That's a key part of what internal audit does, is looks at the Council's top risks and gives you assurance around how those are being managed and being mitigated. At 4.2, we're noting the audit plan was presented as 2 separate plans. That's quite unusual for us, but that's just reflecting recent years during the pandemic. We've gone for shorter audit plans and revised those as the year has gone on. That will change for going forward. We will revert back to an annual plan that we'll seek approval for. In terms of the workload of the sections, that starts to take you through some of the statistics and the key performance indicators that we report to each of the audit committees. And what this does is take that data and presents it as a year-end data set. So this is information for the full year to 31st of March 2022. So 5.1 talks about the number of days that we thought we would deliver and compares that to what we actually delivered, which was slightly ahead. It notes the completion of the audit plan, which was 92% of what we said we would do, was what we actually delivered in the year. And then goes on to talk about the kind of work that we've done that's a kind of periphery of our kind of core work. So around the external client work that we did, responding to requests for advice and guidance, and also the variety of internal working groups that we sat on. 5.5 is noting a significant one of those internal working groups, and that's in relation to the Oracle upgrade that's currently ongoing. As I mentioned, we've got key performance statistics that we report to each meeting of the Audit Committee, and at 5.6 this gives you the figures for 21-22. You'll see that we were ahead of target in all but one of those, and that was completing the plan. The target is 100%, but we were 4 assignments that we didn't complete by the end of the year, and that gave us an overall percentage completion of 92%. In terms of the key part of the report, that's to express an audit opinion, and Section 6 starts to set the background for that, because obviously to express an audit opinion you have to have done some audit work. And that's what Section 6 of the report onwards starts to do, is set out the audit work that was completed and, importantly, the audit findings. And it breaks down into the 3 sections. There's governance, there's the internal controls, and there's risk management. So the first one is in relation to governance, and at 6.2 onwards we set out the work that we've done around that. So very kind of like routine work around inventory procedures, looking at conflict of interest, and also some work in terms of the Council's draft governance statement, which Geraldine will bring to you as an item later on in this agenda. A key part of an organisation demonstrating that they're well governed is if they implement audit actions, and 6.8 is providing members with some assurance around the delivery of internal audit actions in the year, and that's at 100%. Now, just as a bit of a context, the internal audit actions are less than what they would normally be, and that's simply a reflection of the work that internal audit had been doing in the last couple of years around COVID, and it's obviously impacted on routine work and the agreement of audit actions. We also place reliance on the work of our external auditors and inspectors, and the report then goes on to set out some general information around that at 6.11, noting that our external auditors had an unqualified opinion in relation to our 2021 statements, and also in terms of the interim work that they've undertaken, there aren't any significant issues. The report then goes on to talk about risk management and the work around that, and the key part of that was the COVID-19 emerging fraud risk. This was a really helpful report that Audit Scotland published in July 20 that recognised that as a result of COVID there were increasing fraud risks, and set out some areas that suggested that public sector bodies examine. So we did the work on that in 1920 and in 2021, and in 21-22 we followed up with some detailed testing. So that's in relation to overtime and also the Council's use of PayPoint. And the next few paragraphs set out the findings from those audits. In both cases, we recognised that there were risks. We could see that they had been mitigated, but generally in all audits you'll always find areas where there are gaps, and the report reflects that, and the fact that there are a number of recommendations that we're agreeing to address what we see as potentially remaining risks. The report then goes on to talk about other work that we've done in that area around sustainability strategy. At this point it was very much a position statement, just trying to see where the Council were at. So we were finding at 6.33 we could see that key risks were recognised, plans were in place, but we were recognising the challenges that face the Council around being able to practically deliver in this area. We also looked at resource risk registers, we updated fraud policies, and we had a programme of anti-fraud work that primarily involved a review of COVID-19 grants. The last section of the audit opinion is on internal control, and that starts at paragraph 6.39. And the work that we did here was around the unpaid work service. We've done previous work in this area, and this was very much focusing on whether we had management information in place that helped us to manage the service effectively. We could still see isolated incidences where we hadn't reported to the court in time, but we saw significant improvements in the information that was available to team leaders to help them deliver this service. And again, for that opinion at 6.43, we were noting there was a reasonable level of assurance, albeit we have made a number of recommendations to just completely address all of the points that had been identified in the previous audit. In terms of other internal control work, we assisted colleagues in accounts payable, and we also did some work around mobile phone purchasing. We disseminated fraud alerts in the year, and we also facilitated the NFI exercise. That's actually quite a significant piece of work, and there'll be a separate report will come to the Audit Committee on that. Section 7 of the report then takes all of those pieces of work and it expresses it as a single audit opinion. And that audit opinion is at 7.4, and it's noted as being that overall there is reasonable assurance that can be placed on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk management and control arrangements for the year ended 31st of March 2022. Just to give members some context, that's the same audit opinion as a previous year. And the word reasonable shouldn't cause any concern. Reasonable just reflects the fact that we were satisfied in the areas that we looked that risks were mitigated, that our internal controls were sound. But the reasonable word reflects the fact that there were some recommendations, albeit not significant, that were required to just fully address all of areas for improvement. So that concludes the report. And if I can just then take you back to the recommendations, and they are at 2.1. And firstly is that you know internal audit's performance in the year. You know our overall findings from internal audit work, and that these will inform the Council's governance statement. And Appendix 1 gives you the formal audit certificate from internal audit that's signed by myself as the Audit and Compliance Manager, and that you know the level of assurance which is unchanged from previous years. Thank you, Chair. Happy to answer any questions that MD may have. Thanks.
Thanks, Yvonne. Does anyone have any questions for Yvonne?
I don't see any hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I think we move on to moving the report for approval. So I propose to move the report, and I'll be looking for a seconder.
I'll second, Chair.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, and for the committee to now approve the report. Or approved. Not seeing anyone disagreeing. Thank you. So that's approved. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the annual governance statement for 2021-22, plus the significant governance areas Q4 progress report. And for that, I'll hand over to Geraldine.
Thank you, Chair. As explained at the training earlier, this is another end-of-year report that you get, and it is one of the most important reports that the Audit Committee have each year. The background sets out the reason why we do this. The governance framework within the Council and the governance arrangements are based on national guidance and the SIPFA code, and also we measure ourselves against that guidance each year. We have an internal review group, the Good Governance Group, which has lead officers from each resource on it, and they all contribute to the paper that you have before you today. We have a code of corporate governance, the local code of good governance within South Lanarkshire, and that's reviewed on an annual basis, usually towards the end of the year. This year it was approved because of the pandemic in January by the committee, and that is available to the public via the council website, along with the other governance arrangements within South Lanarkshire. The annual governance statement itself has the framework shown in Appendix 1 of this report, and that also features within the governance statement. The governance statement is in Appendix 2. And as I've explained before, this looks at everything within the Council, all the governance arrangements within the Council. In particular, it looked this year at the impact of COVID, and it looked at the SIPFA Financial Management Code and how the Council had complied with that. Now, these were carried forward from the previous year because there was a lot of work done, but the pandemic hadn't gone away and the Council was still impacted. So it reflects that. Also reflects Yvonne's internal assurance opinion from internal audit, and this is in section 6 of the governance statement, and that shows that overall the internal auditor has placed a reasonable assurance on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's governance framework for the year ending 31st March 2022. It also provides an opinion from the Council's Risk Management Service that a good level of assurance can be placed on the Council's strategic risk control environment, and a good level of assurance can be placed on the Council's operational risk control. In section 7 of the annual governance statement, it gives you an update on the significant governance areas. Now, it also provides in that report the areas which have been identified for monitoring throughout 2022 and 2023. Now, these are drawn from the Resource Director's, Executive Director's Statement of Assurance. And the committee is asked to consider these, if these are appropriate for taking forward for monitoring next year. Now, as you will see, there are a number of them. There are a number of them carried forward from 2020, 2021. That doesn't mean that these weren't completed in 2020, 2021, because you will see that there is an update report on that. It just means that the risks, they are still significant areas that we want to continue to monitor next year. And some of these, you will not be surprised at seeing. COVID pandemic still features, cyber resilience still features. There are a couple of new areas and a few new areas, and one of these are the Integrated Joint Board has just published its new strategic commissioning plan for 2022 to 2025, so that has been included. Community wealth building, because as you know, last year the Council established a Community Wealth Building Commission, and it also has a strategy and annual action plan. This will continue into next year because there will be an update on that to the Community Wealth Building Commission, and then there will be a further plan that they will be working to in the new year. And finally, recruitment, because like most public sector organisations, there is now a difficulty in recruiting people to certain posts within the Council. So we felt that was significant enough to include. The committee is also asked to note that the governance statement will be subject to scrutiny by the Council's external auditor, and therefore it may change after you have approved it today. There may be some additions made to it or slight changes, and we will bring that back to you when you have the annual accounts for approval later on in the year in October. I said that I would bring you progress, the Q4 progress on the significant governance areas which were highlighted in the previous year's governance statement, and these are shown at Appendix 3 of the report on page 41 to 49. I don't propose to go through them in detail because you will have read them, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on them. So taking you back to section 2 of the report, the recommendations, I am asking that the annual governance statement attached at Appendix 2 of the report is approved, and that progress against the significant governance areas identified within the annual governance statement 2020 to 2021 is noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Geraldine. Again, can I ask if anyone has any questions?
I don't see any hands raised, Chair.
Okay, in that case, I'll move to move the approval of the annual governance statement and looking for a seconder.
I'll chair that. I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Mary. And does the committee approve this annual governance statement?
Approve.
Thank you very much. And noting the governance areas Q4 progress report.
Chair, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Hopefully you got the noting of the progress report as well. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 4, we've got the unaudited annual accounts for 2021-22. I understand they'll come back later on when they've been audited, but for now we're being asked to note these, and I'll just hand over to Jackie Taylor to talk us through this, please. Jackie.
Chair, I think Paul Manning's going to take this paper for us.
Okay, Chair, thank you. I'm happy to take the paper. This is the unaudited annual accounts for 2021-22, and these first three papers that you've got in front of you really need to be taken as a group together, and that's why we've got the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council with us. So we've had Yvonne's paper, we've had Geraldine's paper on the governance statement, and now we've got the unaudited annual accounts, and they build on each other. So as Geraldine's paper took into account Yvonne's internal audit opinion, in turn, the unaudited annual accounts include a governance statement for the council. So as I say, view these as a package. Unaudited annual accounts. The annual accounts are one of the most important documents that come before a committee of the council in the year, for obvious reasons, as you'll be aware from organisations that you'll be involved with. So I'll take you through the covering paper, and then we'll have an opportunity for some questions. And as the Chair mentioned, Jackie's here as well. A lot of technical detail involved, and Jackie can assist in explaining if need be. So just to start off, the recommendation makes the point that these are the accounts in their unaudited state, and they're going to be submitted to Audit Scotland by the deadline that we've got of the 30th of June. The full document is included as Appendix 1, and they're going to be available for public inspection between 30th of June and the 21st of July. So that's in keeping with legislation. They're being given to Audit Scotland at that point of the 30th of June. The audit will take place. On the second page of the paper, it picks up the fact that after that audit, they'll be brought back, obviously, in their audited state. And there's a date given there by which they'll come back to the committee. That's been set for the 25th of October. Now, there have been some movements and deadlines across the past couple of years because of the pandemic, but Audit Scotland, as it says there, are working to a deadline of the 31st of October, so we will have our committee to review the audited accounts on the 25th. The paper does make reference to the fact that we've got the final outturn position going to the Executive Committee next week, which includes the Council's revenue budget position, and that includes figures which reflect those that are included in the accounts, but it also has included within the paper to the Executive Committee some contributions to reserves for approval. So this assumes that that's going to pass through the Executive Committee. There are a couple of appendices referred to at the bottom of the second page of the paper. One is, it mentions there at 4.9, a reconciliation between the figures that you can recognise in the accounts and those that you'll be able to see in the Executive Committee papers, and also a third appendix, which is the unaudited accounts for the charitable trusts related to the council. So those are mentioned at 5.1, and the fact that they're going to be brought back to the Audit Committee later in the year in their audited state is also mentioned. So going back to the recommendations, it's looking for noting of the fact that the accounts are going to go to Audit Scotland by that deadline of the 30th of June. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. So again, are there any questions for Paul or Jackie on the unaudited annual accounts paper?
I don't see any hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I suggest that I will ask for the report to be noted. So I'll move that it's noted. Keep me right if I'm doing this right. Ask to be noted and look for a seconder.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Mary. And does the committee agree to note the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I think at this point the Chief Executive and the Council Leader can be excused if they so wish.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So moving on to item 5. So this is the internal audit activity as at the 3rd of June 2022. And again, Yvonne will speak to this paper.
Thank you, Chair. This activity report is a report that comes to every audit committee, and it seeks to give the audit committee some assurance as to progress that's been made with the plan that they approved. So this one covers the period 8th January through to the 3rd of June, slightly longer than what we would normally have in a reporting period, and that obviously just reflects the council elections in May. In terms of progress, we would normally only report in a single internal audit plan, but section 4, I've just taken the opportunity to backtrack to 21-22, excuse me, and 22-23 in terms of the progress that we've made. In terms of 21-22, there isn't any new information in there. It replicates what you've seen in the annual report. And in 22-23, there's an update attached to the report at Appendix 2, and that gives you a summary of the progress that we've made on each of the lines. At 4.5, I'm noting the fact that the intention was to come back to this committee, and particularly this meeting, with a representation of the plan. Unfortunately, that's been really difficult to do because I've had a period of unplanned leave, and it's impacted on financial year end. So the intention is now to come back in September 2022 with an updated plan, but I'm hoping that the detail in Appendix 2 gives the committee some assurance around the progress that we've made so far, and the work that we plan to do between now and coming back to the next meeting. In terms of audit findings, again, this is something that you'll routinely see within activity reports, and Appendix 3 sets out all of the audit assignments that have been finalised in the period. That's a split between work that we do for South Lanarkshire Council and the work that we do for our external clients. And the Appendix 3, the very last column, sets out the assurance information. So that's basically trying to very briefly summarise the output from each of the audit assignments. Where we complete work in a more significant area, and that can be because it's a significant risk to the council or simply because the findings are more significant, we extract what we call a key messages page. Now, the key messages page sits at the front of the audit report and is agreed with the head of service as being a true summary of what's in the actual detailed report. And Appendix 4 has one of those in the period, and that was in relation to the work that we did for self-directed support. The working around that has up to now has been very much around procedures, making sure we have processes in place, the correct management information is there, and that we're making good progress in terms of actually delivering SDS assessments. That's the kind of front end of it, and it has very much been the focus so far. What you'll see within the key messages page is signposts in other areas where we think we now need to go and do some audit work. So that's within those pages, what it's suggesting is that in 22-23, the kind of area of focus should shift slightly. We should be looking at the number of assessments that have completed. We should be looking at the scheduling of reviews. Importantly, we should be looking at the compliance with the assessment. So if we have a self-directed support assessment, was that actually what happened in practice, and are we monitoring the actual meets planned? And ultimately, are we delivering the outcomes that SDS set out to do? These are all more difficult areas to audit, but are the key risks that we want to give the audit committee some assurance around, and that will form part of the 22-23 programme of work. Section 6 of the report is more just in there for information. We're talking about the Glasgow City Region City Deal. We aren't the internal auditors, but we do form part of the internal audit work that's undertaken by Glasgow City Council. There are reports, and some of the reports are specific to South Lanarkshire Council because they look at some of the projects that we are delivering. This section of the report is just giving the audit committee some assurance that we will pick up on the audit actions where it's relevant, and we'll provide the committee with some assurance that those actions have been implemented. As I say, it's really just in there for information because there isn't anything to report in this period. In terms of the final part of the report, I've taken the opportunity to include the annual report for the Chief Internal Auditors Group. This is really just for information. It's just to give you an idea of the group which the South Lanarkshire Council form part of. It's a really good group in terms of networking, provides really good training opportunities. And one of the things that we've done during the year is we've widened out the meetings to include all of the audit teams, because we have some really good speakers that come along and provide some good background and context in relation to topical issues. So I've taken the opportunity to attach the report at Appendix 5, and that's really just for information in terms of the kind of wider groups that we form part of, which helps to improve the quality of the internal audit function within the council. So that concludes this report, and in terms of recommendations, quite simply just asking that you know progress and performance. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Yvonne. Again, any questions?
I don't see any hands raised, Chair.
Elizabeth, okay, in that case I'll move to note the report and looking for a seconder.
I'll second, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. So I'm asking the committee now to note the report.
Note the report.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to item 6 on our agenda, which is Audit Scotland Financial Overview 2020 to 2021. And Jackie, are you talking to this one?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody. This paper is a summary of a Audit Scotland report that was received in March this year. A link to the reports provided at section 3.1 of the report. Audit Scotland published 2 overview reports every year. This one that I'm reporting on is on the financial position, and a second report that will follow to this meeting at a later date covers performance and outcomes. So this paper is on the financial matters. Section 3.3 I cover, the Audit Scotland report is actually divided into 3 parts. It covers council's income, it covers financial position and financial outlook. So this is a report that covers all Scottish councils, and I'd point out that it's backward looking. We are looking at the 2020-21 position, which is year ending March 2021. So it is predominantly backward looking. It also covers a period where we were obviously in the midst of the pandemic, so that obviously is a feature across the Audit Scotland report. What we've done in this report presented today is cover each of the parts of the Audit Scotland report and try to pull out the main points that are being made, and also put a little bit of context around how South Lanarkshire features as part of what they're discussing. Part 1, the part that relates to council's income in 2021, won't be of any great surprise to anybody. You can see at the bullets there at section 4.1, there are references to how much funding and income councils got in year, including COVID funding, and also how much specific grant funding was included within that. Also covered as part of that section is council tax and how councils increased council tax over that period of time, and also collection rates. Part 2 of the report, which is covered at section 5, covers the overarching financial position for councils in that financial year. It touches on funding gaps and reports that, not surprisingly, councils were planning to manage funding gaps through savings that were recommended to councils. It also touches on reserves that councils have and increases in reserves, mainly due to late COVID funding. Capital expenditure is also included as part of that part of the Audit Scotland report as well, reporting on progress in capital expenditure and obviously the impact of the pandemic on capital programmes. Debt is also included within that section, and around how councils' debt position has moved. Most councils decreased their debt levels over that period. If I move on to section 6, this is a part of the Audit Scotland report that does look forward, but bearing in mind it's looking forward to a year that we've actually now concluded, so we do have to bear that in mind. Again, it focuses on the Scottish Government funding position and budget gaps that councils are facing. So again, it's of no great surprise to anybody how it reports that councils are obviously having to look at their financial positions overall, particularly in the period after the pandemic. It does report that obviously the funding future position remains uncertain with challenges ahead. Just to finish off, at section 7 of the report in front of you, we do try and pick out if there's any specific references to the council within the Audit Scotland report, and we mention them there in that section. There is a couple of tables that are included within the report, and South Lanarkshire Council obviously features as part of that. That includes council tax collection rates and usable reserves, and there's nothing to report in terms of us being an outlier in any of those. So what we're asking today is that the report is noted and the council's position is noted as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jackie. So again, any questions on that? Or we continue on our pattern? I don't see any hands up.
There are no hands, Chair.
Thank you very much. So in that case, we move to note. I'll move to note and the report and the council's position, and looking for a seconder on that.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thanks, Mary. And again for the committee to note the report and council's position.
Note the report and the council's position.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to item 7. So item 7 is the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum activity paper. So again, Jackie, we're thinking to look to you to speak to this report, please.
Thanks, Chair. This is a simple report. It's a regular report that we will bring to the committee. It reports on the reports that were considered by the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum in the period from July last year to March this year. The duties of that forum are to scrutinise all the council's revenue budgets and review the financial and operational progress of the council's capital programme. The table attached to Appendix 1 notes all of the reports that the scrutiny forum looked at during that period under their main areas of responsibility. You will see a repetitive theme across all of the meetings. We look and consider all of the reporting periods, so that's why you will see similar reports considered at each meeting. But that's just for noting. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks again, Jackie. So again, I'll move to note the report and look for a seconder.
I'll second the report.
Sorry, Chair, just to ask if there were any questions on that.
Sorry. So asking if we have any questions before I do that. Jumped the gun a bit there. Apologies.
There are no hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we move to note the report and looking for a seconder.
I'll second, Chair.
Thanks, Mary. And for the committee to note the report.
Note the report.
Okay.
Chair, sorry, you're on mute.
Apologies. So moving on to item 8, Annual Audit Plan 2021 to 22. And we'll be looking to Andrew Kerr from Audit Scotland to speak to this report, please.
Thanks, Chair, and hello again, everyone. So our annual audit plan for 21-22 financial year starts on page 241 of your papers. The plan serves two purposes. Firstly, it provides you with details of the main risks that we've identified for this year, our proposed audit work as part of the 21-22 audit, together with the timescales for completing this work. Secondly, the plan discharges our responsibilities under the accounting standard to make the committee aware of various areas such as our materiality levels for the audit, the confirmation of our independence, as well as our quality control arrangements. I recognise this may be the first external audit plan that members have seen, so I just wanted to spend a bit of time and go through some of the key areas of interest within this. So firstly, on page 244 of your papers at paragraph 11, I just wanted to highlight that the 21-22 audit year is the final year of this audit team's appointment as the external auditor of the Council. Following the audit appointment exercise, Audit Scotland will remain as the appointed external auditor of the Council for the next 5 years. However, there will likely be changes to the audit team. We will remain the auditors until the 21-22 annual accounts are signed off at the end of October, after which we'll work closely with the incoming auditor just to ensure a smooth handover. On page 245, Exhibit 1 details the materiality levels for audit of the Council and its group, and we'll revisit these levels once we receive the unaudited accounts after the meeting today. Starting on page 246, Exhibit 2 outlines the significant risks that we've identified to the annual accounts. So the first point noted relating to management override of controls can be considered quite a generic risk as it relates to all public and private sector organisations, and it's driven by the accounting standards, and as such we have a duty to consider it a risk for the Council. The second point relates to asset revaluations. In our view, given the level of estimation and judgment involved, together with the material nature of the figures to the accounts, we consider this to represent a risk. And you'll see that we've noted our proposed audit response to both of these points in the right-hand column of the exhibit, and we'll be reporting back on both of these points in our annual audit report. In addition to these significant risks, at paragraph 17, just under the table, we have identified a couple of other areas of audit interest, being the pension liability and the accounting for non-current assets. So these will require a bit more audit focus, but not to the extent of the two risks noted in the table. On page 249 of the papers, at paragraph 24, I just wanted to reiterate again that in addition to providing an opinion on the numbers within the annual accounts, our audit opinion also covers other areas within the annual accounts document, being the management commentary, the governance statement, and the remuneration report. And you'll see at paragraph 25 the types of things that we'll be considering when we're undertaking that work. As we mentioned this morning, the Code of Audit Practice also requires auditors to consider the wider scope of public audit, with our work not just confined to the annual accounts. And as detailed on page 252 at Exhibit 4, our work in this area will focus on financial management, financial sustainability, governance and transparency, and value for money. As part of our risk assessment for this year, we did identify one audit dimension risk, and this is detailed on page 244 at Exhibit 4. I'm sure this point relating to financial sustainability will be familiar to the committee, given the financial pressures faced by the Council and the wider public sector in general. Our findings and our judgments from this wider work, including our response to the risks identified in this plan, will be reported in our annual audit report that will be coming to the committee in October. On page 256, Exhibit 7 sets out the timetable for this year's audit. Now, at the time of issuing this plan, the various committee dates were still to be determined following the local government elections. Now that these are set, we have discussed and agreed the completion timetable with management, and it's broadly similar to last year. And this will allow us to sign off the annual accounts by the 31st of October deadline. Finally, I'd just like to take members back to where we started on page 244 of the papers, specifically paragraph 10. And it's really just to highlight that during the course of the year, should members be aware of any issues with known or suspected fraud, then we'd obviously invite you to raise this with us at the earliest opportunity. I believe this covers the main points of the plan. So prior to the committee noting this, I'd be happy to clarify anything or answer any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. Do we have any questions for Andrew on that report?
I don't see any hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. In that case, I will move to note the report and look for a seconder.
I'll second the report, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And asking the committee to agree to note the report, please.
Note the report.
Thank you very much, Mary. Moving on to item 9. So this is the Audit Scotland report, the impact of COVID-19 on Scottish Council's benefit services, a thematic study. And we have Fraser Morrison who will speak to this report, please. Thanks, Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide committee with a summary of the Audit Scotland report into the impact of COVID-19 on Scottish Council's benefit services. This report was published in October 2021. Section 3 provides a wee bit of background to the pandemic and the way Audit Scotland conducted their study. And this was basically through the issuing of a questionnaire to 32 councils for information to measure the impact of the pandemic on the benefit services in their council. SLC was one of 29 councils able to return a full questionnaire return. As Section 3.3 points out, and the content of the report is based on the returns of councils, and only the claims processing aspect of that can be independently verified to information published by Department for Work and Pensions. Moving on to Section 4, the report key messages. This basically covers the 4 main headings of the report, and I'll take each one as they come. Firstly, housing benefit resources. This section looks at the impact of the pandemic on staff resources. The first bullet point highlights that South Lanarkshire Council was one of 17 councils who operated throughout the year below their full-time equivalent establishment. Ranging across these councils between 1% and 20% below establishment, SLC operated 8% below. These operational staffing levels met the requirements of the service, and they were in line with improvement activities being undertaken by the service. So these were planned operational levels in the council. Further bullet points there highlight the information provided by councils in relation to the impact of COVID and shows maybe some variation in what councils were able to return and were able to record within their individual councils. This is highlighted at 4.2 bullet point 2 that 7 of 29 councils reported no COVID-related absences during 2021, with a further 15 councils reporting absences of less than 1%. South Lanarkshire Council had robust procedures in place throughout the pandemic for recording COVID absences and recorded a sickness-related absence of 3.8%. Further analysis of information provided by councils highlight that only 6 councils recorded any absence due to shielding and self-isolation. South Lanarkshire Council were able to provide statistics in both of these through robust reporting and recording procedures. Bullet point 6, the last bullet point, notes that there were significant challenges faced by the benefit service, particularly the move to home working, and basically the challenge of sourcing laptops, which the benefit service was not in possession of at the time, and we were able to report the number of days lost at 490 days, although this is less than 3% of total days available to the service. At the bottom of each section, issues and risks are identified, and these are covered by Audit Scotland and their recommendations, and that's in section 4.6 of the report. Moving on to 4.3, information technologies. It's no surprise to everybody that council services were significantly impacted by the requirement to work from home where possible, and this South Lanarkshire Council was no different to any other council. 15 of the 29 councils reported significant IT issues with network connectivity and other related IT matters. South Lanarkshire Council was one of the councils that reported these issues, although ours were mainly in relation to the sourcing of laptops and monitors, which, as everybody would understand, all councils were trying to source at the same time. So there was some difficulties in getting these. Moving on to 4.4, claims processing. This section analysed the impact of the pandemic on claims processing, highlighting a number of factors. Council benefit services have made significant progress over a number of years, not just in South Lanarkshire Council but in other councils, in moving towards a more online self-serve focus, and this helped mitigate many of the issues experienced during the pandemic. South Lanarkshire Council has a well-established and effective electronic document management system and online application and change reporting system, which significantly mitigated these challenges. This has highlighted the fact that while all Scottish councils were impacted by the pandemic, the impact in claims processing has been minimal, despite the logistical challenges and the significantly increased demand. SLC was one of 17 councils who had maintained or improved performance over the course of the year in respect of the average time to process new claims and events. Basically, although there was a slight hit in processing times when the pandemic started, this was dealt with very quickly and we were able to move on and achieve and in fact improve performance during the course of the year. Moving on to section 4.5, accuracy. This looks at benefit process and accuracy and the impact the pandemic's had on this. The audit process and benefits is extremely important to provide assurance that claims have been processed correctly and that individuals, customers receive the benefit that they're entitled to. Bullet point against accuracy highlights that in 2021 claims processing performance was maintained or improved in 21 of 28 councils. It also highlights that a number of councils achieved 100% and up to 99% accuracy, whereas South Lanarkshire Council's accuracy was at 93%, a slight dip on the previous year. But we're confident that we've got a robust and independent audit process in place to mitigate the financial risk to the council of paying more than £60 million in benefit subsidy. So we're confident our process mitigates these issues. In section 4.6, as I mentioned before, there's a number of Audit Scotland recommendations based on their findings within the report. The Benefit Service is confident that we are able to meet each of these recommendations. If I could take committee back to section 2, the committee is asked to approve the key messages and recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Fraser. Can I ask the committee if they have any questions on that report?
Councillor Fulton has his hand up, Chair.
Yeah, not so much as a... Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, not so much as a question, just a comment. I think, I welcome this particular report, and it's reassuring to know that even during the pandemic, the council staff had basically the resilience to deal with it, and it's good to see this written down. So I just want to welcome the report and congratulate the staff in working their best during a very awkward time and very challenging time.
Thanks, Alistair. I think I would reflect that as well. I think it's obviously been a tremendous piece of work that's been done to do that. So thanks, Alistair, for that comment in there. Thanks to the council staff. Okay, so I will move then to note the report and look for a seconder.
I'll second the report, Chair, and also echo the views of Alistair and yourself, and would like that minuted, that we thank the hard work of the staff during that period. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And can I ask the committee to agree to note the report, please?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And so we move on to item 10, which is the forward programme for future meetings. And I'll invite Elizabeth Ann to speak to this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standard report for noting that comes to each meeting of the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee. The background is set out at section 3.1 of the report, whereby as part of a range of improvement measures introduced as a result of Audit Scotland's report on the audit of best value in community planning in 2009, an action plan was prepared. One of the actions was to include as a standard item, a list as a standard item for this committee, a list of items for future meetings, and also to provide members with an opportunity to inform future agenda items. You'll see the forward programme to the 6th of December 2022 provided at the appendix on page 269 of your pack. The report is for noting, and if I could refer members to the recommendation at section 2.1 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth Ann. So again, do we have any questions on the forward programme?
Councillor Kerr has her hand raised.
Susan?
Yeah, just when considering the forward programme and noting that under item 4 on the risk register was IGB risk, I think it'd be appropriate to discuss at a future meeting the prospect of creating a new risk around the National Care Service, which could lead to significant industrial relations issues, loss of staff and income, complicated HR issues regarding staff transfers and the impact on service users. The Chief Exec's email of yesterday was very concerning in that there was no proper involvement of COSLA, and some are seeing this as a power grab by the SNP government, and the GMB described it as a fag packet plans. So I think we need to consider this risk to the Council as the NCS legislation goes through the Parliament.
Okay, thanks for that, Susan. I'm not sure where we then consider that risk, whether that gets taken to the next committee meeting or whether where we put that on the agenda.
Chair, I think Paul wants to come in at this point.
Can we seek clarity from Paul?
You can seek clarity from me, Mary, but often you don't find it. Across the course of this year, right, there will be I'm saying across the course of this year, across the course of this summer, there is a review exercise of the Council's top risks. That's been a wee bit disjointed this year because of the election. So normally we would get elected members involved earlier in the year, probably around about April, right? But we have sort of shifted things around a wee bit, and we're looking to bring your involvement in just after the recess before we start coming to committee on this. So there is a review of the top risks. There is an opportunity for member involvement, and I would imagine, right, a move to the National Care Service and you know, all other things regardless, upheaval involved in that is going to be recognised as a risk, right, and what the Council's doing. So I'll come back with an update on when we will report on our updates of our risk plans. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Councillor Kerr has her hand raised again, Chair.
You want to come back, Susan?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for that, Paul, and I'm okay with that. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions?
I don't see any other hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I will move to note the report and looking for a seconder and asking the committee to agree to note.
Agreed to note.
Okay, thank you very much. And the final item is any urgent business.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Kerr still has her hand raised. I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to item 11 of the urgent business. I'm not aware of any urgent business, so I propose that we close the meeting there. The only one thing I did want to say, and I don't know, Mary, you mentioned it before, was not only for the tremendous work during COVID, but this huge amount of work done in pulling together the annual accounts and the audit plans that has clearly been done during this period. So to extend for thanks to the teams that were involved in that as well.
Yeah. I'll second that point you've just made, Chair.
Okay, so if there's no other business, no other questions, I think we can finish there, and thank you very much.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.